So we are reading Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. We are on part 2, the human aura. Page number 17 of the book and page number
29 of the PDF.
Shimangla, you're echoing.
Page 29 of the PDF.
Yeah, okay.
The human aura. Miracles do not happen in contradiction to nature, but only in contradiction to that which is known to us in nature. Saint Augustine.
So really a beautiful saying, right? Because we have limited awareness, we think that something that is happening is not right or not the way that it must happen. But when you look at it from the wider perspective, everything is happening as it is meant to happen. This is something that we are reading about in Power versus Force in the chaos theory also, where they clearly say even under the chaos, there is an organizing element. There is organization below the chaos also. So naturally, when we are looking at something, we don't have the whole spectrum. We are looking at it with closed eyes. We are looking at it with blinkers in the eyes. As soon as you raise your perspective, the bigger picture starts to come about. And see, this is what we are attempting to do when we are doing any of the programs, all the modalities that we are learning. It is only to expand our perception. The more we expand our perception, the better in tune with reality we are going to become.
Introduction, the personal experience. As we allow ourselves to develop new sensitivities, we begin to see the whole world quite differently. We begin to pay more attention to aspects of experience that might have seemed peripheral before. We find ourselves using new language to communicate our new experiences.
So when you look at it, right, as we expand our perspective, as we expand our breadth of our ability to be aware, automatically that the way that we are perceiving things starts to change. The way things are occurring to us starts to change. And when that occurrence, how things are occurring to us shifts, then the whole world around us also starts to shift.
Terms like bad vibes or the energy there was great are becoming household phrases. We start noticing and giving more credence to experiences like meeting someone and instantly liking or disliking him without knowing anything about him. We like his vibes. We can tell when someone is staring at us and we look up to see who it is. We may have a feeling that something is going to happen and then it does. We begin to listen to our intuition. We know things, but we don't always know how we know.
So now this is again important, right? When we start expanding our perception, we start going down and connecting with the big guy. So the perspective, the capacity of the small guy starts to increase. And that is what we are here for, to expand our perspective. In the Gita, in the Vedanta talks, in the Gita talks, etc., Nagarji also always is mentioning that why are we here? Why have we tupcode over here? We have tupcode here to go back into that oneness. We've tupcode here to connect back with that Brahman, right? So in the same way, as we start expanding our perspective, the more expanded we become, the closer we become to that expanded, to that ultimate expanded state of consciousness.
We can tell when someone is staring at us and we look up to see who it is. We may have a feeling that something is going to happen and then it does. We begin to listen to our intuition. We know things, but we don't always know how we know. We sense that a friend is feeling a certain way or needs something, and when we reach out to fulfill that need, we find we are right. Sometimes during an argument with someone, we may feel as if something is being pulled out of our solar plexus, or we may feel stabbed. We may feel as if we have been punched in the stomach, or it may feel like someone is pouring thick, gooey molasses on us.
So again, there was a lot of research done on this, right? That how do people know that they are being stared at? And it's like as if you have eyes at the back of your head and you can feel that energy, right? How do we sense it? It's through the auric field, through that sense, that sensory perception. And see, all of us have these abilities. The more you use them, the more profound it becomes. So we have that sense of knowing, right? And the more we are going into the expanded states, the more perceptible or the more we can actually see the subtlety in the perception that we are having.
On the other hand, we sometimes feel surrounded by love, caressed by it, bathed in a sea of sweetness, blessings, and light. All these experiences have a reality in the energy fields. Our old world of solid concrete objects is surrounded by and permeated with a fluid world of radiating energy, constantly moving, constantly changing, like the sea.
So this is interesting. She says our old world of solid concrete objects, right? So when we are operating at a lower level of consciousness, everything is just what it is. It's just that solid part, right? But then when we expand our consciousness, we start to understand that there is a field around everything. And the object is not just the object. Like we say in the Monroe Institute's Gateway Affirmation, the first thing that we are declaring is I am more than my physical body. So in the old, maybe in some time back, most of the people felt we are only this physical body. But now more and more people are understanding that we are more than our physical body. There is something which is beyond that field which is there around us. This is what we are using in biofield tuning. This is what we are photographing in aura photography, right? In biofield imaging, when we use the GDV, it's all using that same process, that we are actually more than the physical body. We are much more than what we actually can see with the naked eye.
In my observations throughout the years, I have seen the counterparts of these experiences as forms within the human aura, which consists of the observable and measurable components of the energy field that surrounds and interpenetrates the body. When someone has been shafted by a lover, the shaft is literally visible to the clairvoyant. When you feel as if something is being pulled out of your solar plexus, it usually is. It can be seen by the clairvoyant. I can see it. So can you eventually, if you follow your intuition and develop your senses.
So there is something called intrusion removal in shamanism, right? So what the shamans, the old age healers, what they were doing was they were going into altered states of consciousness, and these intrusions which are there, they were sucking it out or pulling it out of your system, right? And they could actually perceive it. Some people can perceive with their hand, some people can actually see it, some people can actually smell it, some people can taste it, right? So these intrusions are actually there. And it's not only depleting stuff which is there, you can also have life enhancing stuff which is put into your auric field to enhance it. Many times the shaman used to put energy fields into your system, which another clairvoyant could actually see that it is there, right? We could actually see it when we're taking the aura photographs. When the shaft is there, it is cutting your aura. Jab nazar lagta hai. When good things are there, when the blessing is there, all those things we could actually see in the aura photographs that we were taking with the Progen aura camera. So these things are real. It is not naturally, most people cannot see it with the naked eye. So again, seeing is believing wala chakkar. But if you do not believe, then you can't see. Again, that quandary is also there. But the clairvoyant can actually see things getting removed from the system, and we can actually check for it also.
It helps in the development of this what modern scientists have already learned about the world of dynamic energy fields. It helps us remove the blocks from our brains that keep us from seeing that we too are subject to all the universal laws. Modern science tells us that the human organism is not just a physical structure made of molecules, but that, like everything else, we are also composed of energy fields.
So again, what she's saying is it's the left brain and the right brain orientation, right? When something gets scientifically proved, it satiates our left brain that it is scientifically proved. And then it allows us to understand it and accept it in a better way. But these things are already there, whether science agrees or not, because science, as it is progressing, it is finding that what the ancients were saying is actually true. But in the beginning, they were debunking it. But now all scientific experiments are proving the same thing.
We are moving out of the world of static solid form into a world of dynamic energy fields. We too ebb and flow like the sea. We too are constantly changing. How do we as human beings deal with such information? We adapt to it. If such reality exists, we want to experience it. And scientists are learning to measure these subtle changes. They are developing instruments to detect these energy fields related to our bodies and to measure their frequencies. They measure electrical currents from the heart with the electrocardiogram. They measure electrical currents from the brain with the electroencephalogram, the EEG. The lie detector measures the electropotential of the skin. They can now even measure electromagnetic fields around the body. Sensitive device called the SQUID, the superconducting quantum interference device. This device does not even touch the body when measuring the magnetic fields around it. Dr. Samuel Williamson of New York University states that the SQUID offers more information about the state of brain functioning than a normal EEG.
So again, we are already using all these things in awareness. Of course, the SQUID is a very expensive piece of equipment, so we don't have it, but we are using the HeartMaths, EEGs, the ECG system, which is called the EM wave. We are using the Mind Mirror, which uses EEG to get your brainwave patterns. We are using the GDV, the gas discharge visualizer, to be able to get the energy field and take a print of it. Of course, we are using the aura camera. We are using the Lecker antenna. We've been using it all regularly with all of you to check your accesses, etc. So we are using a lot of this stuff already in awareness.
As medicine relies more and more upon these sophisticated instruments that measure impulses from the body, health and disease, even life itself, are slowly being redefined in terms of energy impulses and patterns. As early as 1939, Dr. H. Doctors H. Burke and F. Northrop at Yale University found that by measuring the energy field of a plant seed, which they termed the L or life field, they could tell how healthy the plant grown from that seed would be. They found that by measuring the field of a frog's eggs, they could discern the future location of the frog's nervous system. Another such measurement pinpointed the time of ovulation in women, suggesting a new birth control method.
So again, the instruments can detect a lot of stuff, right? And you can actually figure out a lot of things just by using instruments. So the plant's energy field, every plant has a field, and you can actually test. You can work with plants in biogeometry. What they do is also they work with shapes which the water is charged when it is given to a plant, and using that the plant grows well. Over here, of course, he's saying that this every seed's energy field can be measured, and we can know where how the plant will grow. So actually nothing is hidden, right? What it is saying here clearly, that nothing is hidden. If you can detect it, if you can observe it, if you can become aware of it, everything is available to us, right? We will know everything that is there.
In 1959, Dr. Leonard Ravitz at William and Mary University showed that the human energy field fluctuates with a person's mental and psychological stability. He suggested that there is a field associated with the thought processes. He suggested that variation of this thought field caused psychosomatic symptoms.
So again, when we are looking at it from the biogeometry principle also, there are various levels of consciousness, or they call it the various levels of nature. And each level, whether it's the physical plane, the emotional plane, the vital plane, the mental plane, the spiritual plane, they have again isolated it and slotted it out into various levels of consciousness. And each of those levels is associated with a particular aspect of how we are living. Like when we are coming into this book also, as we go ahead, we will find that there are various layers of the aura, and each layer of the aura is also related to a particular aspect of our lives and what we are doing. So he is saying very clearly here that the human energy field fluctuates with how we are responding to mental and emotional vibrations in within ourselves, as well as when we are externally subjected to it. And see, this is what we are working on all the time, right? To bring equanimity into ourselves, bring that centeredness into ourselves, so that nothing can cause us to get hillowed, right? Nothing can move us, nothing can cause a disharmony in our field, in that stability that we are maintaining within us. But we need to understand that emotional, mental, and physical, everything around us is constantly affecting us.
In 1979, another scientist, Dr. Robert Becker of Upstate Medical School, Syracuse, New York, mapped a complex electrical field on the body, which is shaped like the body and the central nervous system. He named this field the direct current control system and found that it changes shape and strength with physiological and psychological changes. He also found particles moving through this field that are the size of electrons.
Okay, so again, electricity or this field has particles. So we when we are looking at it in other terms, and especially when we are looking at from from biofield tuning perspectives, we are talking about photons of light, right? So every energy field is basically photons of light. They are moving, and you can perceive them. One way of perceiving them is when you're flying in the aircrafts, right? And it's very sunny outside. You look out of the windows and squint your eyes a little bit. You'll see squiggly light kind of things in the window, right? Though they are the photons of light. And when we are breathing, we are actually breathing those photons which are energizing us, right? Now, this Dr. Becker, he's written a book also. His first book was, of course, Direct Current Control System, Direct Current. But he wrote another book which he called Body Electric. And in that, he actually did experiments and he was talking about salamanders, the normal chipkali that we have, they grow their tail back. So how do they grow the tail back? He actually studied that what was happening was the electrical potential of the skin changed when that thing started growing, and he started actually inducing it in people, and he actually succeeded in growing limbs back of human beings. Of course, it was a very tedious process, so I don't think it caught vogue, but he actually succeeded in growing the limb back of people. In that book, he mentions it very, very clearly.
Dr. Viktor Inushin at Kazakh University in Russia has done extensive research with the human energy field since the 1950s. Using the results of these experiments, he suggests the existence of a bioplasmic energy field composed of ions, free protons, and free electrons. Since this is a state distinct from the four known states of matter, solids, liquids, gases, and plasma, Ilyushin suggests that the bioplasmic energy field is a fifth state of matter. His observations showed the bioplasmic particles are constantly renewed by chemical processes in the cells and are in constant motion. There appears to be a balance of positive and negative particles within the bioplasma that is relatively stable. If there is a severe shift in this balance, the health of the organism is affected. In spite of the normal stability of the bioplasma, Ilyushin has found that a significant amount of this energy is radiated into space. Clouds of bioplasmic particles which have broken away from the organism can be measured moving through the air.
So again, when we are looking at it, what Eileen calls it in the biofield tuning process is that she calls it the ether, right? So you have the plasma and then you have the ether, which is called the fifth state of matter. Now, when you say the clouds of bioplasmic particles have broken away from the organism, that means what happens? That the bioflotons are constantly being radiated. Okay, that energy is constantly being radiated. Like whenever you sit somewhere, you're leaving something there. If you touch something, you're leaving something there. When you're doing biogeometry, we want a witness of a person. We will tell the person, rub a piece of tissue on your forehead or rub it anywhere on your body and give it to us. It has your essence. So we can test you just using that piece of paper that you've rubbed on your thing. We can test you with one hair. If you give a hair, we know exactly what is happening with you by testing with you. So we are constantly radiating this field. This is also the way in which a dog can find you, because you're constantly radiating these photons and it goes through your shoe, right? Of course, if it's insulated, then it may not go, but it actually goes. That's how the dogs can find you. They'll smell something and then they'll go and find you where you are. So what is happening? We are constantly releasing this stuff and it can be tracked.
Thus, we have been plunged into a world of life energy fields, thought fields, and bioplasmic forms, moving about and streaming off the body. We have become vibrating, radiating bioplasma itself. But if we look into the literature, this is not new. People have known about the phenomenon since the dawning of time. It is just that in our time, the phenomenon is being rediscovered. It was either unknown or rejected by the Western general public for a time, during which scientists concentrated on our knowledge of the physical world. As this knowledge has developed, the Newtonian physics, given way to relativity, electromagnetic and particle theories, we are more and more able to see the connections between scientific objective description of our world and the world of subjective human experience.
Okay, so this is nothing new. All our Devi Devtas had that halo around them, right? And see, first we used to be sensitive, right? When we were hunter gatherers, the right side of the brain was working more, and we were working with intuition. We were working with these senses. We could see the fields, etc. Right? And then slowly, what happened as we came to the modern age, we started becoming more left brain. The left brain cannot perceive all this. Okay. So as we started becoming more mechanized, we started becoming more mechanical, we found that we were solely concentrating on the physical, जो actual hai. We forgot about the etheric, we forgot about the field which was there. But as science started to progress, we started to understand that behind the physical, there is something which is creating the physical. And if that thing was not there behind the physical would not get created. So we are slowly shifting from Newtonian physics to Einstein's theories to quantum physics, where everything is moving, everything is vibrating, nothing is still, everything is constantly moving, constantly radiating, and is constantly changing. But in our perception, it is not changing, right? So as we start expanding our perceptions, we can see below the actual figure and we can go into the field to check it out as to what is happening in the field.
Chapter 4: Parallels between how we see ourselves and reality and Western scientific views. Are products of our Western scientific heritage. How we learn to think and many of our self definitions are based on the same scientific models used by physicists to describe the physical universe. This section gives a short history that shows the changes in how scientists describe the physical world and how those descriptions correspond to the changes in our self definitions.
So as we changed our perceptions, right, the way that we are perceiving ourselves and the way we are perceiving the universe automatically starts to shift. So when we move from Newtonian to other processes, the way that we were perceiving also shifted.
It is important to remember that the way the Western scientific method works is to find agreement between both mathematical and experimental proof. If the agreement is not found, then the physicist will look for another theory until there exists both mathematical and experimental proof for the explanation of a set of phenomena. This is what makes the Western scientific method so powerful a tool for practical use and leads to great inventions like the use of electricity and the utilization of subatomic phenomena in medicine like X-rays, CAT scanners, and lasers.
So one thing about the scientific method is that unless you get a definite, uh, confirmation from two sources, they will not act. And this was even when you're talking about remote viewing, this is something that happened even during the wars and when the Cold War was going on. Suppose they got an information from a remote viewer of doing something. They wanted physical confirmation from the site before they would act. So in the same way, what she's saying over here is that unless there is mathematical proof which is concurred by experiential experience, they would look elsewhere. So again, we are talking about wisdom or knowledge or information and experience. Both of them have to go hand in hand for wisdom to get created. So the theory would not be proved unless it was mathematically proved as well as experientially proved. And of course, this has led to so many innovations, which we are now automatically, all of us are using. Uh, she's mentioned X-rays and CAT scans. Now, of course, you have MRI, you have CT scans, you have so many other different kinds of scanning devices which can actually scan into you.
As our knowledge progresses, there is always the discovery of new phenomena. Many times, these new phenomena cannot be described held when they are explained. New, broader theories, usually based on all the knowledge that has gone before, are postulated. New experiments are designed and performed until agreement between experimentation, and the new mathematical proof is found.
So again, we come back to theoretical physicists, right? Like I keep repeating, Einstein was a theoretical physicist. So what he was doing was he was doing the experiment in his hand, in his head. So he created the mathematical formula for a particular theory. Now it was still a theory, right? Now, and then unless the experiment was done, the theory was not proved. So it never became a law. Now, once the theory and experimental proof started to work together, it becomes a law, right? So you have law of thermodynamics, you have Newton's law of motion, etc., right? But before they became laws, they were probabilities. They were just theories. So what he's saying over here is again that the mathematical theorem has to be proved using a physical experiment. And many times what happens is there's a big gap between when the theory was proposed and when the experiment proved it. So many times, many of the theoretical physicists, their theory was proved many years after they passed away, right? Because at that time, the instruments were not there to be able to construct the particular experiment.
The new theories are accepted as physical laws. The process of finding new ways to describe new phenomena is always one that broadens our views, challenging our current limited thinking about the nature of physical reality. We then incorporate the new ideas into our daily lives and begin seeing ourselves differently.
So in the beginning, they were saying that the earth was flat. And then the new idea came. Galileo presented it that the world is actually round, and he was ostracated for that, right? So as we start accepting the new ideas or the new phenomena, the way that we are viewing things also starts to automatically change.
This whole section shows that the scientific view of reality supports the idea that we are composed of energy fields and, in fact, goes far beyond that into realms that we are just beginning to experience. That is, a holographic view of the universe. In this universe, all things are interconnected, corresponding to a holistic experience of reality. But first, let us review some of our history.
So this is something that we are talking about even in power versus force, that everything affects everything else. And attractor fields are created for something to manifest. So over here, what she's saying is that everything is interrelated and we live in a holographic universe, right? Everything is connected to everything else. We talked about the morphogenic field as proposed by Rupert Sheldrake. And we talked about the holographic universe that Priam had actually proposed, right? Both of them conjunct into one field.
Newtonian physics. Until recently, when the Eastern religions began to have a greater impact upon our culture, much of our self definition, largely unconscious, was based on the physics of a few hundred years ago.
Now, this is also very important, right? If you really see, scientific experimentation is hardly like 300 or 400 years old. That's it. It's not more than that. All this development in science is just 3 or 4, maybe 500 years old. Before that, it was more the spiritual cultures. It was more the shamanic cultures, the native cultures which were in vogue, and everything was moving according to that.
What I am referring to here is our insistence on seeing ourselves as solid objects. This definition of the universe as made up of solid objects was held largely by Isaac Newton and his colleagues in the late 17th and early 18th century. Newtonian physics was extended in the 19th century to describe a universe composed of fundamental building blocks called atoms. These Newtonian atoms were thought of as composed of solid objects, a nucleus of protons and neutrons, with electrons revolving around the nucleus, much like the Earth traveling around the sun.
So again, we learned this in basic physics that everything is made out of molecules. Molecules are made out of atoms, and atoms are made out of neutrons, electrons, and protons. Now, as far as we can see, because of the electron microscope, we perceive the neutron, proton, and electron as solid objects. So basically, what Newton's Newtonian physics says is that everything is made out of a solid object.
Newtonian mechanics successfully described the motions of the planets, mechanical machines, and fluids in continuous motion.
So again, solids move in a cycle. So using the cycle, you can actually start to predict that if the planet is rotating like this, in a year's time, where will that planet be? If water is going to move, it will move like this. If wind is going to move, it will move like this. So basically based on physical noticing of what and how things work.
The enormous success of the mechanistic model made physicists of the early 19th century believe that the universe was indeed a huge mechanical system, running according to the Newtonian laws of motion. These laws were seen as the basic laws of nature, and Newtonian mechanics was considered to be the ultimate theory of natural phenomena. These laws held firm the ideas of absolute time and space and of physical phenomena as strictly causal in nature. Everything could be described objectively. All physical reactions were seen to have a physical cause, like balls colliding on a pool table.
So again, it became like a clock, right? In a clock, you have various mechanisms, which are basically levers which are moving in a particular way, which make the clock hands move. So their view of the world was that everything is like a clock. It has to move according to certain set principles, and it will not vary, right? So everything is moving like clockwork. It's moving like a clock.
Energy matter interactions, such as a radio playing music in response to invisible radio waves, were not yet known, nor did it occur to anyone that the experimenter himself affects the experimental results, not only in psychological experiments but also in physical ones as well, as physicists have now proven.
So now what has been found is that previously it was found when we were looking at it from the Newtonian principles that when an experiment is being done, the experimenter doesn't influence the experiment. But when you get into quantum mechanics, they found that the presence of another person during the experiment shifts the results of the experiment. Now, what you're thinking will shift the results of the experiment. So basically what is happening is that the experimenter is influencing the experiment, which was not thought of previously. They did not, in the Newtonian world, they didn't think that the experimenter could affect the experiment. If A plus B is equal to C, anyone does it, A plus B is equal to C. However, in quantum physics, the results start to change.
This view was very comforting and still is to those of us who prefer to see the world as solid and largely unchanging, with very clear, definite set of rules that govern its functioning. Much of our daily lives still run on Newtonian mechanics. Except for the electrical systems, our homes are largely Newtonian. We experience our bodies in a mechanical way. We define most of our experience in terms of absolute three-dimensional space and linear time. We all have clocks. We We need them to continue our lives as we have structured them, mostly linearly.
So again, when we think of Newtonian terms, in Newton physics, time and space is fixed, right? But when we are going into expanded states, we constantly say this. When we are going into expanded states, space and time do not exist anymore. But what she's saying over here, that electricity is the only thing. Now, of course, we've got mobile phones, we've got the cable system coming into a thing where cable is being transmitted, we've got telephone systems, we've got so many other systems which are not related to physical things. They are transmissions which are taking place and we are catching them, right? So, of course, things are changing.
As we rush about our daily lives in an effort to be on time, it is easy to see ourselves as mechanical and to lose sight of the deeper human experience within. Ask anyone what the universe is made of, and he or she will most likely describe the Newtonian method model of the atom. Electrons spinning around a nucleus of protons and neutrons. However, if we take to its literal extension, this theory puts us in the rather disconcerting position of thinking of ourselves as being composed of itsy bitsy ping pong balls whirling around each other.
So basically in Newtonian physics, where the balls are running around, all are moving and we are also moving with the balls. So it feels stiff, or it feels that it's not moving, and still around us the table is all moving and vibrating.
Field theory. In the early 19th century, new physical phenomena were discovered, and that could not be described by Newtonian physics. The discovery and investigation of electromagnetic phenomena led to the concept of a field. A field was defined as a condition in space which has the potential of producing a force.
So this is very important, right? So up to then, they had not discovered electromagnetic fields. Now, as soon as they discovered the electromagnetic fields, then Newtonian physics could not describe it. Could not, the theory of Newton's theory did not work. So the three laws of Newton, I think it was equal and anyway, forget. So the three laws of Newton would not work with the electromagnetic theory. So they developed a new theory, which was called the field theory.
The old Newtonian mechanics interpreted the interaction between positively and negatively charged particles like protons and electrons simply by saying that the two particles attract each other like two masses. However, Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell found it more appropriate to use a field concept and say that each charge creates a disturbance or a condition in the space around it, so that the other's charge, when it is present, feels a force. Thus, the concept of a universe filled with fields that create forces that interact with each other was born. Finally, there was a scientific framework with which we could begin to explain our ability to affect each other at a distance through means other than speech and sight. We all
So, so what is it saying? That because these particles are able to influence each other and they are radiating a field beyond what the solid mass is, it can affect each other. So incidentally, that field effect can go to infinity. So what this implied was that everything is affecting everything else.
We all have had the experience of picking up the phone and knowing who it is before any words are spoken. Mothers often know when their children are in trouble, no matter where they are. This can be explained in terms of field theory.
So again, the morphogenic field, right? So everything is related. All information is in the field. If we can connect into the field, we can download the information.
In the last 15 to 20 years, 100 years behind the physicists, most of us have just been beginning to use such concepts in describing our personal interactions. We are just beginning to admit that we ourselves are composed of fields. We sense another presence in the room without seeing or hearing them. Field interaction. We speak vibes, or sending energy to others, or of reading each other's thoughts. We immediately know whether or not we like someone, whether we will get along with him or clash. This knowing can be explained by the harmony or disharmony in our field interaction.
So this is something that we all are experiencing, right? And especially in the workshops, as you start doing it, you'll start sensing this, like someone is standing beside me. Many people have started sensing this, right? That I'm smelling a smell which is actually not there. So where is it coming from? The field, it's in the field. The quality of that smell is there. The quality of that color is there. And that is what we can start to sense, right? We start to perceive it as our sensory perception starts to expand.
Relativity. In 1905, Albert Einstein published his special theory of relativity and shattered all the principal concepts of the Newtonian worldview. According to relativity theory, space is not three-dimensional and time is not a separate entity.
So basically, when we are looking from the Newtonian perspective, we have three lengths, right? Length, breadth, and width, right? So it is solid. Everything is solid. With theory of relativity, he added a fourth dimension, which was time.
Both are intimately connected and form a four-dimensional continuum, space-time. Thus, we can never talk about space without time and vice versa. Furthermore, there is no universal flow of time. That is, time is not linear, nor is it absolute. Time is relative. That is, two observers will order events differently in time if they move with different velocities relative to the observed events. Therefore, all measurements involving space and time lose their absolute significance. Both time and space become merely elements to describe phenomena.
So what does this imply? Let us say I am here and Mr. A is here and Mr. B is here, right? Now they are both observing a monitor which is on the other side of me, right? Now if A is moving fast, if B is moving faster than A, right, what will happen is that the perspective with which Mr. B will be looking at things will be different from the perspective with which Mr. A will be looking at things. So when you come into space, because they're shifting in space and they are shifting in time. So time for this guy is different for time for this guy because this guy is moving. For example, when you get into outer space, right, the concept of time, the way that we look at it sitting on Earth is very different in how you will experience time when you are in space, right? So like that, it constantly shifts. This is what he is attempting to tell you.
To Einstein's theory of relativity, in certain conditions, two observers events in reverse time. That is, for observer 1, event A will occur before event B, while for observer 2, event B will occur before event A.
So again, it depends on the point of observation. If A is here and B is there, then there are two events taking place between them. Then event X for A will take place before event Y. But if B is observing from the other side, then event Y will take place before event X. So again, it depends on the perception. From where are you observing the phenomenon?
Time and space are so basic to our descriptions of natural phenomena and ourselves that their modification entails a modification of the whole framework that we use to describe nature and ourselves. We have not yet integrated this part of Einstein's relativity into our personal lives. For example, when we get a psychic flash of a friend in trouble, say about to fall down the stairs, we check the time and call the person as soon as we can to see if she is all right. We also want to know if such a thing happened in order to validate our insight. We call, and she has had no such experience. We conclude that it was our imagination playing tricks on us, and we invalidate our experience. This is Newtonian thinking.
So what does this imply? We've got an intuitive flash, right? Now that intuitive flash doesn't have any cognizance of time and space because it's coming out of the blink, right? It's coming from the big guy. Where when we are acting out of the small guy, we are constantly in Newtonian physics, basically, because we are constantly aware of whatever we are aware of. But when we get into the big guy, time and space starts to get squeezed, right? So we may have an intuitive flash, which is not already happened. It may be going to happen, and it may have happened in a long time back in the past. Because again, in those expanded states, time and space don't exist, right? So many times we debunk ourselves that it is not going to happen. So they've been doing some experiments with random number generators. And what they have found is that many times you can screen the result, or when you're going into an intuition, you screen the result which will happen in the next throw. Like when you're throwing a dice, right? You're intending something and that dice doesn't come, but it'll come in the next throw. Or you are looking at your intention is working in the third throw after that. So there's a lot of experimentation done on this also, whereby we can actually perceive stuff, but we may be perceiving it little unsynchronized with the present time as we know it under Newtonian physics, right? How we are experiencing time. There can be a shift in that. So it becomes very important to actually start perceiving. Like suppose you're playing on the roulette table and observe when you're putting the number, your number doesn't turn up and you say, no, I'm very unlucky. But if you start really mapping the numbers, maybe after every 3 chances, the number that you put on has come. So now you have a trend, and then you can work with that trend. Again, there's a cycle, or there is an organization beyond the chaos also.
We must see that we are experiencing a phenomenon that cannot be explained by Newtonian mechanics, but we are using Newtonian mechanics to validate our supersensory experience. In other words, what we saw was a real experience. Since time is not linear, it may have already occurred. It may occur at the time when we see it, and it may occur in the future. It may even be a probable occurrence that never manifests itself.
Now, this is very important, right? So I've already said that, it may have happened in the past, it may have happened in the future, it may have actually happened now. But the more you connect with your intuition, the more you'll be able to start discerning whether it is going to happen or it's already happened or it's going to happen. And then it says it may be even a probable occurrence that may never manifest itself. Please understand that when we are getting into these intuitive predictions, etc., when we make a prediction, we influence the entire flow of events, right? So now, when I'm looking into something that may happen, we always talk in terms of probability. The probability of this happening is 80%. The probability is 70%, right? Because there is always a chance of that thing not manifesting. Okay, so this is what he means by it may probably never manifest itself also. Now, when you all will get to do it when you start doing the excursion workshop, going into gateway, and especially in guidelines. Where in guidelines, we go into something called the ish frequency. And it's an extremely powerful state where you can actually go into these states and really get downloads. Of course, you can do it with the one breath technique, going into focus 12, etc. also, but it really starts to work. And that sense can tell you a lot of stuff before it is actually going to manifest, right? So we have I personally have developed a way of counting. And whenever someone asks me a question, I'll count, right? And what I have seen that if it is above 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, the chances of it manifesting are very, very high. Yes, Annalisa?
I can't start my video because otherwise the whole thing will get disconnected
Okay,
again.
not a problem.
Lately I've been feeling like there is something around me. I don't know how connected this is to what you were saying, but I feel like there's something around me. And even during the day, like, sometimes people get scared because it's night or something like that. So I see things like something is moving or something like that, but I can't see it. And when I was out with my friends recently, we were just fooling around and using this one app which helps you identify the person and the age in the room.
Mm.
So when we were doing that, it every time they kept putting it near me, it kept identifying someone between the age of 24 to 30,
Okay.
somewhere around me. And it kept showing that there was somebody there. I don't know what this is, but then I was just wondering if that is the same thing that I kept seeing every time. Even during the day, I can see like flashes, like something moving or something around, but I can't see what it is. When I actually go to see, like, I feel like someone was standing there, but then nobody's there.
Yeah. So you're not being able to see with your normal eyes. You're
Yeah.
being able to see with your inner eyes, right? So people are
Okay.
there around us all the time. These fields
Yeah.
are there
Yeah.
around us all the time. Now, just as
Okay.
an analog, I'll tell you that today there is one wire which is coming into your house, right?
Okay.
Now, that's a cable TV coming. How many channels are there?
I don't know.
Few thousand maybe nowadays, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now how are each of the channels existing in that same wire?
Uh, through the connection,
What do you mean through the connection?
wherever else it is connected, and from there
They
it's
are
being
existing in
transmitted.
that same wire because they are being transmitted at a different frequency.
Correct.
Now,
Yes.
if you want to see any channel, any particular channel, you got to
You
tune
tune
your
into that
TV to that
frequency.
particular frequency. And
Correct.
then that particular picture will come, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they are all existing in that same space. All the
Correct.
channels are existing in that same wire, in that same space,
Yes. Yes.
right? So we are living in a particular environment.
Okay.
Okay. Now we are vibrating at a particular frequency range.
Uh-huh.
Now, don't you think that more frequency ranges can exist in the same
Possible.
space which we
Yes.
cannot perceive?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now if we expand our ability to perceive, then we can start perceiving those other realities which are existing in the same space.
Correct. Correct.
Have you got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Now,
it's similar. Yeah.
many times when we were, of course, you are very young, but I
Uh-huh.
remember when, Doordarshan and all was there,
Yeah.
the tuners were not very, very sensitive. So
Uh-huh.
many times we used to get the picture of one channel and we used to get the sound of the other channel.
Uh-huh. Correct.
You
Correct.
remember that?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because the precision of tuning was not there.
Uh-huh.
So like that, we are all very precisely tuned to our physical, this 3D environment that we are living in. But if we can expand our perception, those other realities are available to us.
Okay.
You understand?
But
So you've been doing
but
a
there
lot of
will
practices.
but there'll be so many people around, not
Absolutely.
just this. Why just, this, I
So
don't know
there
if
is
there are more
yes, so
in that
you're
age
more,
group.
so you see, I'll tell you, when we go into expanded states, most of the time when people experience other people, they find that they are in their prime health from the ages of
Uh-huh.
25 to 35.
Okay.
That's what
Okay.
the experience of people has been. Because over there you can take, and this is something that Robert Monroe talked about in Far Journeys also.
Uh-huh.
Where he said that he experienced them as that state. Unless they want to maintain that old state or a younger state, most people would be at their prime. Because in what state would you like to be? In your prime,
Correct.
isn't it? Given
Yes.
an option, everyone would like to be in their prime state of physical being.
Yeah.
So, and over there we have a choice. We can do what we want. We can
Okay.
appear as we want. So we appear as in our prime state.
Okay. Earlier also, I told you when I was living in another house and I used to keep seeing things happening, but that time I never saw anybody. Like
So
things
your
around me used
perception
to
is
happen.
increasing. Hold on to it. Don't leave it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just because it didn't happen at the time we tried to correlate it, by no means proves that our insight about the possibility was wrong. If, however, within our insight about our friend, we also saw a calendar and a clock with Newtonian time on it, our insight would be such as to include that information about the space time continuum of the event. It would be easier to validate in Newtonian physical reality.
So again, in that vision, if we saw a clock and we saw a calendar with the date, we could actually, say that yes, it has happened at that date. I think we can stop here. Today is the 7th.